that there is a scheme operated under the auspices of the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is said to have boosted the economy and raised, for instance, local production of rice since 2016, when the economic diversification strategy of the current administration was launched. And then you have a series of other funding arrangements as well as capacity development initiatives to support MSMEs across the country.
And we all know that SMSE launched by successive administrations over the past 20 years. What impact have these plans had on the country's economic performance till date? What economic interventions have been most successful by the administrations? And what has been the most notable economic achievement? These are some of the issues we'll be looking at today on Good Morning Nigeria, this Monday, the 24th day of June. So on that note, I'd like to welcome you to the program. My name is Blessing Abu.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Blessing, also welcoming you to this edition of the program. Wherever you're watching us, for us here in Abuja, where we are broadcasting from live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, it's another wet morning. And as always, in a complimentary segment of Good Morning Nigeria, we shall have newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, let's take the highlights of the morning news. And here's our colleague, Kende Olaleye. Good morning, Kende.
Good morning, Kingsley and Blessing, and here is the news. President Muhammadu Buhari is commiserated with Zamfara State, and the government and the people of Zamfara State for the infiltration of bandits who killed several innocent citizens in Tafe local government area of the state. A statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shields, said President Buhari described the bandit attack as callous and despicable, assuring the people of Zamfara and all the Nigerians who have lost loved ones to violent attacks that the government, under his watch, will soon bring such dastardly acts to an end. President Buhari commended the new administration in the state for putting in new security measures to curtail the activities of criminals and bandits and urged them not to despair, but to see the latest attack as a challenge to step up collective actions in partnership with the federal government, while urging law enforcement agencies to take prompt and timely actions against the wicked attackers. President Buhari appealed to citizens to have faith in the security agencies by giving them useful information on plans and movement of the bandits. President Buhari has asked for a thorough investigation to determine what is responsible for the gas pipeline tragedy in Oyigbo local government area of Rivers State, in which several fatalities were recorded. The incidents, which reportedly occurred in Komkom local community of the local government area, occurred when workers were fixing a faulty section of the pipeline. The president, who is extremely pained by the loss of lives in the incident, expresses his condolence to the families of the victims and to the government and people of Rivers State. The federal government has commenced an inventory of projects executed under the World Bank Agricultural Intervention Program known as FADAMA. This is coming as the financial support given to the program by the World Bank ends.
FADAMA, which has been on the ground for the past 25 years, has presented a landmark in the Nigerian agricultural sector.
To hold dialogue with state government to ensure that the legacies that have been established by this project are not allowed to die.
And as the world commemorates the International Widows' Day 2019, 250 widows in Abuja have been empowered in skill acquisition with a target of reducing poverty among the less privileged women in Nigeria. This skills acquisition is an initiative of an Abuja-based non-governmental organization for the needy.
I'm expected to be making this cream for myself and my family, and in case I want to start selling, then I'll make a large quantity.
We believe that based on what they have been able to do after today, will enable them to register their company in a CAC. Thank God for the ease of doing business and the fact that federal government has reduced the cost of registration. Then see them through registering their respective products in NAFDAC and the respective regulatory agencies. So that
clear. Democracy is a game of numbers. Minority can never preside over majority in a democracy. In fact, I'm told we have APC 22, PDP 8, and the NNPP 1. We will stand by you, we will start with you, and together we will ensure that the rule of law prevails in Bauchi State.
Oshimala said the party would ensure the police did the right thing in Bauchi by providing cover for Parliament and securing lives of members. The Taraba State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal sitting in the Federal Capital Territory High Court, Apo, has commenced hearing the suit filed by the All Progressives Congress candidate Sani Abubakar Danladi, challenging the emergence of Darius Dixon Isaku of the People's Democratic Party as the winner of the 9th March governorship election. The petitioner has submitted to the tribunal the voters' registration of 6 local government areas for state, which it wants to use as evidence before the tribunal to support the alleged overvoting during the election. The first, second and third respondents, which are INEC, the PDP and Governor Darius Isaku, objected to the move by the petitioner.
At the pre-hearing session, it was agreed that whatever objection any party has to any document is to be taken as part of the final address. And that was why they were reserving their reasons for their objection.
Election petition is sui generis. It's a special precedence that if you are going to take every objections and rulings are given in respect of same, the tribunal will not conclude the trial.
The case has been adjourned to Wednesday, 26th of June for the continuation of the trial. And that's all on the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Blessing after this break. Don't go away.
All right, you're welcome back. Now it's time for us to take some business stories with experts commending the federal government's increased revenue generation through tax in 2018. Now they stress the need for improved commitment to widen the tax net. This is just as analysts are predicting that oil prices could skyrocket to well over $100 per barrel if the conflict between Iran and the U.S. escalates. Here's our correspondent, Joy Uzo.
Welcome to Business News. Lots of accolades continue to trail Nigeria's improved performance in revenue generation through taxation. Most recent is from a microeconomic analyst, Professor Ken Ife, who expressed delight with the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, for their performance in 2018, increasing Nigeria's tax base from 20 million entities to 35 million entities now paying tax. Professor Ife says more still needs to be done, especially with the volatility consistently witnessed in global oil price.
About 60% of our traders are informal traders, and businesses are informal, and you need to get them into the tax net.
We are saying, let us move away from direct tax to indirect tax. In doing that, let us also widen the tax base.
In the meantime, the tax expert says transparency on the part of government in ensuring that taxpayers' money is judiciously used for developmental and visible projects will boost compliance. In another development, trending news show a full-fledged war between the U.S. and Iran would immediately affect global crude prices, as the recent escalation of tensions in the Middle East indicates. The only question now is how high could crude go? Earlier in June, an advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei warned that oil prices will spark to levels unbearable for the U.S. and its allies, and is likely to top $100 per barrel when and if the first bullet is fired in the Gulf. Both crude benchmarks, West Texas Intermediate, WTI and Brent, ended weekly trading in the green after Tehran shot down a U.S. surveillance drone over the Strait of Hormuz, a vital waterway for oil supplies. The biggest gains were seen right after the incident on Thursday, when WTI soared more than 4% and Brent was up more than 3%. These prices were the highest level reached since late May, with WTI settling at $57.43 a barrel and Brent at $64.45 as trading closed on Friday. These developments have increased fears that the start of a war between the U.S. and Iran may cause a supply disruption that would further send oil markets up. And to equities, a total turnover of 7.476 billion shares worth 91.107 billion naira in 17,192 deals were traded last week by investors on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The NSE All-Share Index and market capitalization depreciated by 0.65% and 0.59% to close the week at 29,851.29 and 13.155 trillion naira, respectively. Analyzing market performance for the week ended 21st June 2019, capital market expert Mr. Isint Eze says the market, even though closed negative, total volume and value of transactions is spontaneous and monumental. For this week, he says,
well, we expect mixed sentiment unless there is a major trigger. A major trigger in the sense that if the new cabinet can be constituted, that will bring good news.
More details from the market as trading continues on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange this Monday. With that, we wrap business news. Many thanks for your time. Bye for now.
Many thanks, Joel, for the business package. Up next for us is a newspaper review segment.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebe, is with us on the studio this morning. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning. Good morning, Blessing. Good morning, Nigeria.
I hope you had a pleasant weekend.
Yes, very restful watching football.
Super Eagles?
Yes. Falcons first, there are several reactions and it's very interesting. Somebody said, you see 3 pigeons landed on the pitch. That is signal that we will beat us 3-0.
That's superstition number one.
Properly superstition and sheer coincidence. And truly true, our players were done in unfair refereeing. I think one of those goals ought not to have been a goal. Anyway, that's my personal opinion, but that is good. But so luckily, the Super Eagles at least were able to surmount Burundi. We had assumed it was going to be a walkover. There are no minions in African football any longer.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. What was the basis for assuming that Burundi was going to be a walkover?
Exactly.
I mean, Burundi was unbeaten, during the qualifiers.
Yes.
Unbeaten. So if they snatched a draw from the Super Eagles, that would also have been a huge accomplishment for them. But Igalo's goal was superb. There's no question about it.
We had to bring in our Arsenals.
Yes, at the right time.
Yes.
Okay, we have only 2 papers to review this morning, Daily Trust and Al Jazeera. Let's begin with Daily Trust newspaper. D8 countries commit to implementation of health and social protection program. And also there on the front page, Assembly crisis, I'm not Edo Godfather. That's attributed to Oshobole. Details on page 15. Lead story says thousands of pupils skip primaries 5 and 6, and of course leapfrog to JSS 1. Now, right at the foot of the front page, anxiety as traders and federal government maintain claims over trade fair complex. That's page 19. Court jails 5 REA directors over 5.2 billion naira fraud. REA stands for Rural Electrification Agency. NACON reduces 2019 Hajj fares and extends registration to July 15th. Details on page 3.
Okay. Al Jazeera Nigeria is the next paper we have. Let's go to the foot of the page. Obiano Mo's Soludo and successor. You'll find out more details about that on page 13. Now, National Assembly, that's Kika Goje's troubles worsen. More details on page 32. Now, on the EU report, how Buhari's decisions for such security challenges, it's what is trending on page 14. And back to Edo State, Edo 2020, how Oyego Oshomole field may affect APC. More details about that on page 29. And on page 2 is a story from Kogi State, Yahaya Bello's achievement to earn him second term. This is coming from Best Unze Jumbo. Leading for Al Jazeera this morning, ministerial list to hit National Assembly, July. With Rider, Senator Abu Ibrahim, Wadada, Aregbesola, Ambodi, Akpabio, top list. More details on pages 11 and 12.
Well, let's start with the development in the referred to pupils in primary 5 and 6 getting to GS1. It's similar to the chap who did jump under age and also PI with very excellent marks. The challenge for them in the primary school is this. Pupils are coached quantitative aptitude, verbal aptitude, arithmetic to pass common entrance. And because they get to secondary school before age 9, they are rather immature for the challenges of secondary school. In secondary school these days, they take in JS1 13 subjects.
If not more.
And that can be very challenging for a child of 9 who is just learning how to be independent to take care of him or herself. And so there's always a problem. And something has to be done about that. But the other news is about the reduction in the Hajj fare that has been announced by the Nigerian Hajj Commission. This is a consequence of a downward review by the Saudi Ministry of Hajj, particularly as matters relating to land transportation in the Saudi Kingdom. There is a reduction of about 620 Saudi riyals, which is equivalent to $165. This has led to the Hajj Commission giving directive to all State Pilgrims Welfare Board to give a refund of 51,117 naira, 45 naira to all pilgrims that have paid. State Pilgrims Welfare Board have been directed to ensure that the equivalent is paid to pilgrims. Meanwhile, the final arrangements are being made and the deadline for payment for pilgrims have been extended to July 15th. The other concern is about the report about banditry. President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed serious concern and sympathy to the people of Zamfara about bandits killing persons in Safi local government area. As media aide Garbashi, who says that the president described the whole scenario as callous and despicable. He assured the people that violent attacks are to be brought to an end very soon. Meanwhile, the Daily Trust has reported that bandits in Zamfara state have given conditions for laying down arms. They demand a halt to what they describe as extrajudicial killing of Fulani at local markets. They also ask to be allowed to attend local markets without fear of intimidation. The Commissioner of Police in Zamfara State, Usman Nagogo, says authorities recently reached out to the armed bandits. And the Commissioner of Police has said that the vigilance group in Zamfara, known as Yansa Kai, there had been instances to halt, they've been enjoined to halt extrajudicial killing in local markets. And as a follow-up of this, as a follow-up to this, the Commissioner has called on the vigilante groups to stop that atrocities. And therefore, there is a peace initiative between the Yansa Kai, their leader, Sani Babardoka, says that there was a peace pact 3 years ago, and they, the vigilante group, surrendered their arms, but the other persons failed to surrender their arms. They say that they are ready for anything that will bring peace to local environment. Meanwhile, abduction of travelers along Kaduna-Abuja dual carriageway has reduced considerably. Residents of Regina says that the attack have reduced since the last 3 weeks. However, there were 2 incidents, one on Thursday at a village known as Sabon Safa village, and one other on Saturday. However, the residents of Regina say that now even the people who go to farm say they are no longer meeting the bandits again. And also sometimes they usually come into Regina town. They have not been coming, and for a long time now, they have a rest of mind. And so encouragement to Operation Puffada. They are puffing them out of their hideouts and gradually taking them out of the highway.
All right. A story on abduction. You recall, there's a story on page 6.
Yes.
The Magajin Gerin Daura,
yes,
who was abducted on the 1st of May. The story there on page 6 of Daily Trust is reporting a group organizing prayers and also indicating that no word yet had been received from the abductors of the district head of Daura, who was snatched from his residence on the 1st of last month.
That's another story too on the inside pages. We'll find page 6 as well for Al Jazeera. Saying something about 100 foreign NDDC, that's the Niger Delta Development Commission now, scholarship beneficiaries face deportation. And the worries over non-payment of the academic fees. That's on page 6, like I said.
Over the weekend, there was an information about a pipeline explosion that is allegedly have killed some persons. Some people are reporting 10, others are reporting about 8. It happened in Oyibo local government area of Rivers State. The community source said that they woke up about 8 in the morning to hear a loud sound and they saw a bellow of flame and smoke. The residents say about 8 persons at least were counted dead, and there could be more. Chairman of the local government area, Gerald Ofoji, has confirmed the deaths. However, the international oil company that is said to have that oil pipeline says that its company has not recorded such explosion. There was a big fire on Saturday, but it had been put out by Saturday morning. President Muhammadu Buhari has ordered investigations into the causes of that explosion.
Okay, Bayo, that's the newspaper review for this morning. We'd like to thank you for being around. We're just trying to scan through the papers to see if there are stories. Well, thank you for being around. See you again tomorrow.
All right, and thank you for having me.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with the economic performance in 20 years of Nigeria's democracy.
The military after independence was in charge and ruled the country for many years. To many Nigerians, they did not see the benefits. Perhaps it did not give them the desired opportunity they craved for. Though it was rough and tough, with a lot of price to pay, Nigerians began their agitations, which bettered the democratic governance we are currently enjoying. Looking at the economic achievements since 1999, previous administrations have attempted to improve on what was on ground with laudable policies, but no significant and sustained impact was made. Late President Musa Yar'Adua came with a 7-point agenda with focus on improving the economy and well-being of Nigerians. But the plan became a mirage with his tenure cut short by his demise. His successor, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, also came with programs to strengthen the economy, but the bottlenecks in the ease of doing business discouraged investors and created a major challenge for the then administration, even though some progress was made at the country's economic indices, according to observers, started improving with the launch of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Public Works and Youth Empowerment Program, to mention a few. By 2015, when the present administration came to be, it also came with a robust and laudable program, especially in the area of economy, and successfully it pulled Nigeria out of recession with its economic diversification program. One of the first steps for this government was looking at ways to block leakages and also cut down on cost of governance, initiating the Government Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, inclusive of Government Economic and Empowerment Plan, Anchor Borrowers Program, Conditional Cash Transfers, Trader Money, and the most recent, the Export Expansion Grant, with promises now to consolidate on the gains recorded. How has the previous economic plans impacted on today's economy? What kind of interventions are required in terms of policy, regulations, institutional and investment to move the country to economic stability? What factors have impacted the country's economy so far? These questions and more will be answered shortly by guests on the program this morning.
All right, Blessing, I know that you're going to introduce the guests, but just before we start, the point of correction there from our background, the military did not rule Nigeria after we gained independence. You know, the military first came in 1966, and that was when the country was already more than 5 years as an independent country.
Sure, you're right. Now, we'd like to welcome our guests on the program. I would like to start off with Professor Nazifi Darma is of the Department of Economics, University of Abuja, and also a former director of the National Planning Commission. Professor Darma, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nigerians, and good morning.
Also joining us on set this morning, I'd like to welcome Professor Kenny Faye, is a economic policy analyst. Thank you very much for coming on the program. And in our Lagos studio, I'd like to welcome Shuaibu Idris, a financial analyst who is joining us from the Lagos end. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Blessing, and good morning, Nigerians. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, incidentally, I mean, all three guests are our usual guests whenever we are discussing economic issues, and so they are familiar with our processes and procedures. Shuaibu Idris, of course, in addition to his financial analysis skills, is also a former banker. So, gentlemen, we're looking at economic performance since 1999 as part of the rubric of celebrating 20 years of unbroken democracy in the country. The country's economy has been, some would say, through ups and downs in the 2 decades of the Fourth Republic. But what is your assessment? Let's begin with Professor Nazifi Dama.
Thank you very much. Well, it is normal for any economy to experience cyclical fluctuations in terms of growing, in terms of having reduction in the growth. But the resilience of such an economy is the ability to put in policy measures to move the economy out of recession, for example, into sustainable growth trajectory. In the last 20 years, I would like to discuss 5 key issues that have defined our developmental trajectory or our economic developmental stride. Number 1 is the issue of national development planning culture. When the Obasanjo administration comes in, it conceived the policy of national economic empowerment, development strategy, cascaded it to the state, which we call state economic empowerment strategy, and then the local economic empowerment strategy, which is a version for the local government. When Yar'Adua came on board in 2007, he conceived the policy idea of the 7-point agenda. After Yar'Adua, when Jonathan comes in, he conceived the policy, or rather, Yar'Adua started the process of Vision 2020 Economic Transformation Blueprint. I was in the National Planning Commission. We spent 11 good months to put up that policy. After Jonathan was sworn in as a substantive president in 2011, he conceived the idea of transformation agenda. Now, after Yar'Adua, General Buhari, after Jonathan, Muhammadu Buhari comes in, and then we are now in economic recovery and growth plan. If you look at all these documents, they are not plans. I have said it, I am saying it, and I will continue to say it. They are strategy documents. And the basic difference between a strategy document and a plan is that a strategy document set out your objectives and initiatives without proper costing. But a national development plan will put out key macroeconomic objectives, initiatives, strategies, and then transforming those initiatives and strategies into costed projects and programs for federal, state, and local government. Why? Because developmental interventions are characterized with mutual complementarities and dependencies, that it is just not possible for the federal government to get it right, for only state governments to get it right, and for local governments to get it right. There has to be harmony, horizontal and vertical harmony across sectors and across the state. That is one aspect. The second aspect is the way and manner we finance infrastructure. Of course, we have so much infrastructure gap. The recent National Infrastructure Master Plan indicated that we require over 30 trillion to be able to fill our infrastructure gap. $30 trillion over the next 20, 30 years. But you see, the financial strategy we are adopting of using debt in order to fill the infrastructure gap is an extremely unsustainable strategy because it's costlier. The issue is that we need to put our hands together in order to be able to provide infrastructure, but in a more sustainable financing model, which is the world over, which is using public-private partnership. Number 3 is the issue of economic management collaboration between the federal government, the state, and local governments. We have one single economy. But over the last 20 years, we have been operating as if the state governments and the local government are independent of each other. We have had several meetings of the National Economic Council literally on a monthly basis over the last 20 years. But up till now, you go to states, you see federal government projects, the state government is not having anything relating to do with that. At the federal level, you have trillions and trillions of naira worth of projects that are outstanding that have not been completed. At the state level, it's a Samsung. Now, it is the failure of this collaborative economic development strategy between the three tiers of government that make of the federation that is one of the key problems. The last issue that which is important.
That would be number 4, 4 over 5.
Number 4, yeah.
Okay.
It's the issue of our focus on foreign direct investment, its attraction strategy, and what is the consequential impact of the FDI, particularly on the productive sectors of the economy. There seems to be a blurred understanding or a blurred perception with the fact that a lot of times we tend to perceive venture capital oriented foreign direct investment that is put in the stock market as FDI. That is non-impactful FDI, particularly in the context of our developmental needs as a nation. What we require is targeted foreign direct investment in productive sectors of the economy, in agriculture and industry. And we have not been able to do what is right relating to that. Why? Because we have not put our house together, and that is why we could not be able to achieve that. And the last one is the issue of policy alignment. Now, you cannot be able to achieve so much without having every sectoral policy clearly defining what requires to be done, so that anybody that is coming into this country or that is interested in investing in this country has a clear perspective of what is the sectoral direction, what does he expect, and it provides an element of macroeconomic predictability, consistency, and harmony, which is one of the key factors behind attracting investment. So we need to, so if you see literally all these things, you realize that yes, we have made some giant strides. In the early part of the Obasanjo administration, if you look at the macroeconomic indices, they were going at a positive direction. Positive direction not because there is a deliberately homegrown economic policy that drive it, but because the period coincided with increases in the prices of oil, its monetization, and the consequent positive impact of such monetization on macroeconomic indices and the ability for us to achieve the 6 to 7% growth trajectory within that period of time.
Yeah, Professor Dama, thanks a lot. Just the right point, for you to come down. You've already indicated your 5 issues in terms of the pillars for assessing Nigeria's economic performance in the last 20 years.
Exactly.
Yes.
Professor Kenefe, you've listened patiently, no doubt.
Yeah, he's my colleague. I do enjoy listening to him. Now, the thing is, this is a very big subject because it goes across several regimes. We can look at macroeconomic performance and all the indicators, underlying indicators. And then you now see variabilities and the impacts of misalignment, policy misalignments, and all sorts of things, most of which he has alluded to. But we can also look at the sectors as impacts of policies on sectors, and so we could use those as ways of. But before I go into any of those, and if we are going to, I'm not sure which one we are going to start with. What I just want to say is to throw what hit me. Yes. Now, in the last 20 years, what has hit me about the economy, and then we can begin to unpack those. The first thing that hit me is bank recapitalization in 2005. Because what we now did was we now built the banking sector and increased the flow of credit and then made sure that at least 2 banks can come together and finance $500 million project, unlike you needed 20 banks to do that before the recapitalization. And then the Nigerian banks spread across the whole of African continent, So giving us opportunities, I don't think we've utilized those opportunities that they have created by going out there. Then there's the second one, the debt forgiveness in 2005. With that burden of debt forgiveness, allowed the government the flexibility to start funding some projects. And then there is also the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. That was very impactful because not only that we have debt management office, now we know how much we owe. In 2005, we had no idea what we were owing. They were counting debt from everywhere. But now we have a debt management office that can answer questions about debt sustainability. And we have institutional structures that we have created by that Fiscal Responsibility Act, the Commission, and also fiscal strategy paper, MTEF frameworks. All those things have to come. And so it actually has a very important framework for public finance management. Then we have the financial crisis in 2008. And we were very lucky. We escaped that. But we paid a big price because we ended up setting up AMCOM. And AMCOM ended up public finance of 5 trillion naira to bail the financial sector. Very, very, very remarkable. Of course, we couldn't do that in 2016 when we were in trouble. Now, there's also the TSA implementation, the Treasury Finance account. That thing, yes, that was very good because it began to disabuse the armchair banking that we had at that time, where government will go and government entities will go and deposit their money in the commercial banks, earning no interest, and go back to the same banks to borrow money at 15% or more. So that began to open up, and then we saw over 2 trillion returned to the coffers. And then at one single look, you could see all the monies that belong to government and all these. So it should potentially have reduced our borrowing. But there are other things that could also have reduced our borrowing if we implemented the FRC operating surplus that have 122 MDAs on our award. They're not bringing all their money every month. 80% should be in our coffers. Now we have recession. The recession of 2016 that hit us. And it wasn't until February 2017 that we had a response. And the response was economic recovery and growth plan. And you see, like the 2020 vision, which Jonathan and his group did, I have a lot of respect for this AIGP plan because there's a way it achieved a macroeconomic handshake and a way you could see some of those that have succeeded. For example, CBN succeeded in robust leadership because it was based on the plan. You see the debt management office acting off the plan. You see the payback acting off the plan. Many things are acting, but many of them are sleeping. But you can see those that are working off the plan. And then you can see one, let me stop on this, because you see one anchor borrowers program, and then you start saying, but have we not been having agricultural program for the last 20 years? You know, what is special about this? It is special because of the way it delivered end-to-end intervention in selected value chains and poured resources, and used both two-lane, focusing on the large commercial farmers, yes, who are anchors or aggregators, and they reached out to subsistence farmers to integrate them into the global supply chain. So that's remarkable. It's not rocket science, but it's remarkable and has been delivered. So let me just stop there. There are many things to talk about.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's get to Lagos, where we earlier introduced Shuaibu Idris, a financial analyst. Yes, you've listened to your colleagues, panelists here, and I'm sure pursuing a strong, virile, and broad-based economy has been an Herculean task for the Nigerian nation in the last 20 years. Well, you may wish to travel with us on your own trajectory. Let's see where we have our highs and where we have our lows.
Thank you very much, Blessing. You know, each time I'm contributing from Lagos, I have to speak last. And when you speak last, you probably don't know which part of the pendulum to belong to. Is it the Professor Nazib angle or Professor Kenife? And meanwhile, I'm not even a PhD holder. I'm just an ordinary degree holder and discussing this issue with professors. But be that as it may, I think I will align my thoughts more to Ken Ife's position. You see, an economy of a nation can be, categorized or probably, structured in such a manner that you can look at what have we done in manufacturing sector, what have we done or what have we achieved in the last 20 years in the agri sector or the financial sector or the services sector. Let's look at the manufacturing sector because my last place of work was in the conglomerate of Dangote Group. I will say, for example, in the last 20 years of Nigeria's democracy and the economic policies that the government has pursued has yielded significant result in certain respect. For example, 20 years ago, Nigeria was a net importer of cement. Today, we are a net exporter of cement, thanks be to the government policies that ensured that Nigerians indeed could set up cement plants and be able to not just produce cement for our local consumption, but also for export. There are quite a number of other industrial sectors, industries within the manufacturing sector that have suffered, backwardness. For example, we no longer produce rubber, nor are we producing so much of tire locally. Just by way of an example, you will say, in that sector, there is a bit of a mixed blessing. In certain areas, we've made progress. In certain areas, we've not made progress. We indeed have retrogressed. There are areas where we should have made even better progress than where we are. For example, the national sugar policy that needed to have been implemented so that Nigeria could be self-sustaining in terms of sugar manufacturing or production, we're still nowhere near the achievement of the goals and objectives. If anything, we are almost 5-10 years behind schedule. Needless to talk about, say, salt production, or even the diversification of the manufacturing base of the country, despite the export expansion grant, which the initial teaser of the presenter did alluded to the fact that Nigerian government do give export expansion grant to exporters so that they could get a little more revenue and thereby doing so diversifying the economy. So as far as manufacturing is concerned, it's a mixed blessing. In terms of agriculture as a sector, again, I will say it's a mixed blessing, but indeed, we've made some giant strides. If nothing, we are now able to significantly reduce the quantum of rice that we import, and we are producing rice locally. It is gratifying to note this. And how did we get to where we are in terms of rice production? Basically, economic policies or government policies of, helping the local farmers with either the Empower or Anko Borrower Scheme or other economic programs that were, initiated by the Obasanjo regime and continued by the late Eradua regime down to Goodluck Jonathan and indeed President Buhari's regime. If you look at the banking sector, of course, that is my darling industry because that is where I spent a greater proportion of my career. I will say we've done extremely well. The Nigerian financial sector has been fairly vibrant, in fact, much, much better than even some of the developed economics financial sectors. Yes, Professor Ken Ife did allude to the fact that we had a banking consolidation. It was a good exercise. However, it was a bit lopsided because certain part of the country is still paying the price of the somewhat challenges of the implementation of that policy. Fast forward, other service sector, particularly say the Nollywood sector, which the rebasing of the national economy and the GDP of the country gave rise to giving some level of emphasis on the service sector as relates to the film industry that we are now getting enormous amount of revenue and also generating employment opportunities for Nigerians. I think these are sectors that indeed we are able to have achieved remarkable growth in the country arising from the democratic dispensation. Needless to talk about the Nigerian in diaspora. No discussion on economic of Nigeria that will be complete without discussing the 22 or thereabout $billion various Nigerians working abroad are bringing in. Yes, Professor Nazib did allude to the fact that investment that we claim to be foreign direct investment that goes into the capital market does not impact positively to the development of the Nigerian economy. Where we need much of this foreign direct investment is in manufacturing sector, in the infrastructure sector, that we can possibly rejig the economy and be able to generate even more employment. Last but not the least blessing is the issue of unemployment. It has degenerated. When we started, democratic dispensation in 1999, the level of unemployment was somewhere below 19 or somewhere around 15%. Today we are talking of 23, 30%, or some are even quoting 43%. I mean, we have degenerated in those areas. And when you look at the misery index that is measured based on inflation rate, interest rate, and unemployment and underemployment rate, again, Nigeria has degenerated. So 20 years to sum it up is a mark of mixed blessings, a cocktail of some successes, some failures. But overall, I think we are on the right trajectory, but we need to do more on institutional building. It is not enough, for example, to have a debt management office when we are not, managing the debt at a level that is sustainable for future generation. It is not enough to have a budget office when budget figures are seldom rolled timely, and they are, even before they are brought out, they are dead on arrival. It is not enough to have Bureau for Public Procurement when, in essence, those institutions are just there for the sake of being there. You see, still in government organization where say 100 naira item is being bought at 500 naira, price. Why should we have all those? So it's a mark of mixed blessings as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Thank you very much, Shuaibu Idris from our Lagos Network Center. Next time we are having you on Good Morning Nigeria, we'll begin our round of questions with you. So, okay. All right. So let's come back. I mean, Professor Kenife raised the point. So look, the subject matter is a very broad one.
It is.
You can see each of you, of course, is speaking from your perspective. Kenife, macroeconomic, and then Shuaibu Idris, financial, as well as sectoral analysis. And of course, Nazif Dama, you've always been very particular about plans and planning and planning. Now, let's return to the issue of plans and planning, because if you plans is the major pillar of what you talked about. Every other issue relating, for instance, to economic management collaboration, policy alignment, and FDI, all of those ones are all tied up with plans. You were a director in the Ministry of National Planning.
National Planning.
National Planning Commission.
Before it was bastardized.
Sorry. All right. But what you said is, in 20 years, what we have seen are strategy documents rather than national development plans. The first question to ask is, why has it been difficult for us to return to national development planning rather than strategy documents at the national level? And why have the subnationalities been unable to also, follow suit with what we are seeing in terms of strategy documents or national planning?
Excellent. We have a three-tier federation. And before I answer the question directly, let me make some background. The reason why I keep on insisting on the fact that as a developing economy with approximately 200 million people, you can't achieve real macroeconomic stability and sustainable development that is positively oriented and add value to people without working for it. Just take the example of somebody who one wife, and the wife is young and giving birth to children. He is in a 2-bedroom flat, and he has 5 children, 6, 7 children. If he doesn't plan to expand, then the place becomes a problem. And the major reason why I'm insisting on development planning are 2 reasons. Number one, in the first phase of the post-independence era of this country, we have seen how wonderfully this country has achieved sustainable development that add value to everybody and promote prosperity after the implementation of the first and second national development plan. Number 2, bigger countries that are part of the emerging economies, countries particularly China and India, these countries have had consistent national development planning culture. India is implementing its 14th consecutive 5-year national development plan. That is almost 70 years. China has been consistent with planning, and we can see how those economies have been transformed. The reason being the fact that an economy is composed of multiple sectors. And as I've said, there is an element of strong interrelationship and dependency between what happened in one sector and what is happening in the other sector. Development planning enables you to have a coherent national input-output modeling in such a way that what you spend on this sector, how does it impact on that sector, so that you see the economy from a much broader perspective. Secondly, it also enables you to know on a long-term basis what is the total cost implication of developmental intervention sector by sector. What is your projected income? What is the possible resource gap? How can you be able to fill that resource gap? What component of development intervention can comfortably be provided by the private sector because it has a price mechanism? What part of it must be provided by the public sector, and what part of it can be provided through public-private partnership? Now, if you are able to achieve that, the economy as it is will have been much, much better and much, much better repositioned than what it is. Of course, let me confess that there are outliers among the states of the Federation. Kaduna has been consistent, particularly after the return of El-Rufai. They have their medium-term state development plan. Lagos has been consistent for almost the last 20 years. They don't wait for the federal government. So, but the reason why instituting planning culture at the federal level is very important is because other tiers of government usually have a copy and have respect for what the federal government does. And the federal government, as the senior partner in the federation arrangement, will have the ability to drive other subnational entities to be able to adopt that planning culture. What we are earning from oil and what we are earning from non-oil export and even the remittances, if you compare it to the costed developmental needs of our country, is extremely insignificant. But many a times, if you put your house in order, you have your national development plan, there are a lot of international sovereign wealth investors that are interested in investing in emerging economies. And the future macroeconomic projections and indicators indicate that the sub-Saharan Africa in the next 20, 30 years will lead in economic prosperity in the world, and there is prosperity arising from investing in the continent. But nobody will take his money from sovereign wealth fund, come and invest in our country where we don't have a coherent document that aligns sectoral policies, sectoral priorities, costing, and so on. Secondly, and we need to do this quickly, it is a fact that capital expenditure delivery is one of the costliest in Nigeria relative to other countries. I think Mr. Vice President has been alluding to the issue of elite consensus. And I think this issue of elite consensus needs to come into being so that we sit down and talk realistically. Federal government, state government, private sector, so as to have realistic costing of capital expenditure delivery. You can't have a very high cost relative to others and expect that people will bring their money into your economy. and invest. But significantly also, we need to have a talk and discussion on the cost of doing business and cost of capital. The Central Bank of Nigeria intervention is a laudable, non-market oriented intervention in order to stimulate the economy. Now you could imagine what economic prosperity could have been attained if an individual business entrepreneur with a very good proposal can approach any bank and get money at less than 2-digit interest rate. And we need to sit down. It's not the issue of allowing market forces to determine things. Markets have never, can never, and will never ensure optimality in resource allocation. It is people that are involved in the running of the market that can sit down, talk to themselves, manipulate the market forces to achieve predetermined macroeconomic objectives.
Thank you very much, Professor Dharma. Okay, let's get back to Professor Kenny-Fetu. Every one of you have talked about the different areas and the different burdens it carries. But let's gauge performance on human development alongside the economic variables that you have all raised. Where is our greatest worry, at least, or where are your greatest worries as economists?
If you look at population, first of all, let me associate myself with the comments of Professor Dharma, because they say 60% of your time should be spent on planning and 40% on implementation. And so, he can't overemphasize the need to have coordinated planning, strategic alignments, and all of that. And if you look at what is happening in agriculture from the CBN point of view, I have attended their meeting 2 Fridays ago. And I saw the level of consultation of the state government. The first group was state government that they consulted because they hold the land. And they hold 50% of our economy. And they are going to intervene massively in agriculture in 10 value chains. You have to start with the states. Then he went on from there to consult with the operators, current operators producing, and they said have money and expand. Then new entrants coming in was the third level of consultation. So you could see all that. But that's the culture he was alluding to. And then you notice that at some point you had needs and seeds and leads. That is in trying to bring that level of coordination and alignment. And if you look at the FRA 2007, although it was initiated by federal government, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it encouraged the state government to adopt the same, and they set up similar institutions. Whilst they cannot force them to do so, the federal government had to lay ambush and said, well, if you want to borrow money from abroad, or you want to raise bond, you have to show that you have done that. You have done that. So he will send out the debt management office to go and check whether they have actually implemented this. He sent up the SEC to go and check the viability of the. So the federal government is coming back by laying ambush. So it's just that it hasn't got that force. But the National Development Plan will compel all of us to work in that direction. And then you have a National Economic Council that overlooks all of that. So the structures are there. The devil is in the implementation, which is always the case with Nigeria. Now, coming back to your question, you see, our population growth rate at 3.2% is the one that worries me. Because when you have that, and then you have the population below poverty line growing faster than the population growth itself, it tells you that there are unequal things, that a lot of things going on in the growth we see is not inclusive because there's so much poverty. Then also, you look at the GDP is growing below the population growth rate. And you see the agricultural growth rate is growing below the population growth rate. It is a cause of worry. It's a cause of worry. That's why we have to throw our support behind this new presidential directive on agriculture to see whether we can engage and do it in a way that hasn't been done before. But there are many things that worry me about this. Unemployment rate, because you're talking about human capital development. Sure. There is one good news, though, that whatever has happened, we have proliferation of universities. The private sector are investing in the education sector. But there hasn't been a commensurate improvement on the quality of education. So we actually tend to be losing more people going to Ghana or somewhere else to go and get education when we should be, bridging that gap. And the labor force is also growing at a phenomenal rate. And then none of those rates give me comfort because they are not showing, there's no alignment between those rates and the population growth rate. And I have things that are called population time bomb in 2030, where we expect that our population would have increased to about 400 million, 2050, then you have the agriculture not likely to meet the demand. And then young people are not going into agriculture, and then the average age of the farmer is about 60, and all that whole population time bomb comes to mind when we are looking at human aspect, capital aspect.
Professor Kennedy, thank you very much. Gentlemen, including Shuaibu Idris, we can return to some of the details of the issues that you have raised. But something is also occurring to me, and I want to start off with you first. When we're talking about unemployment and the fact that the growth that we have seen in the economy in 20 years hasn't been inclusive, and therefore the kind of crisis that we're having, the demographic crisis and all of that, one of the commonest things that we hear and we have heard is, oh, let's provide jobs for our youth, our teeming youth. Let's create MSMEs and so on and so forth. I'm just wondering, in advanced economies, take the US for instance, oftentimes you hear a government say, our focus is to boost the middle class. Because once you boost the middle class has the opportunity and the capacity of levitating the underclass. Some people would argue that during the Obasanjo years, the middle class saw some resurgence, but that seemed to have evaporated, and they appear also not to be in the matrix of all these job creation efforts, dealing with unemployment and tackling economic issues. Are we conceptually missing something, therefore, about rallying the middle class and then ensuring that the middle class acts as appropriate guide and lift, for the underclass?
Thank you very much, Kingsley, for that question. I will start by saying that Professor Dharma did allude to the fact that the economic prosperity or growth that we witnessed under the Obasanjo regime was largely due to exogenous factors rather than the indigenous factors. The oil prices when Obasanjo came into being were somewhere around $20. By the time President Obasanjo was leaving, oil prices were in the region of $60, $70, or $80. So exogenous factors made it possible for a somewhat vibrant middle class to emerge under the leadership of President Obasanjo. However, I think there are 2 or 3 fundamentals that we need to look at. I've been talking about this in quite a number of fora. Number one, we tend to be importing poverty willy-nilly. What do I mean? Nigeria is probably the only country where almost any level of work share, labor is being imported. We export nurses to USA, yet you go to certain hospital, you see nurses being imported from India. I have been to a number of offices where I have seen secretaries that are not Nigerians, either Philippines. It is now even a vogue for an average Nigerian family to import nannies from Philippines and other Asian countries. Now, Kingsley, ask yourself, how and where will a middle class develop when there is no gainful employment? If you have a child of, say, 24, 25 years age, able-bodied, either he or she has finished a HND or a first degree, and there's no job for him or her to earn a living, how and where will income come to that kind of a person? How will a middle class develop if you don't protect your labor force? Nigeria is the only country where engineers, marketers, I've seen companies that have had even their human resource heads being headed by foreigners. This is an abnormality that the federal government of Nigeria and indeed the economic policy formulators need to quickly tackle. Secondly, we've been speaking about infrastructure, and when we started discussing, there were discussions centering on the quantum of dollars, $30 trillion that we require to fix our infrastructure. Kingsley and Blessing and other discussants, let's look at what has happened from 1999 till date. The single major most important infrastructure that we need to fix are probably, electricity, or is probably electricity. How much has the Federal Republic of Nigeria spent on electricity? Without fixing this, how and where will you have a vibrant middle class? How will you have, micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises that will spring up so that they can offer a succo for earning a living? Again, we need to look at those aspects. Someone was given an example. Indeed, my former boss was given an example of Egypt, where within a period of 5 years, 10,000 megawatts of electricity was added to the national grid of Egypt. In the last 20 years, how much have we spent on electricity generation? How much have we added? Under Obasanjo regime alone, we spent $16 billion. And how much have we added? So without fixing electricity, forget about developing a vibrant middle class in Nigeria. Needless to add, other infrastructures such as road network, rail network that we require. Imagine the quantum of leap that we were able to make with the telephony service that we've been able to achieve. At the inception of democratic governance in 1999, what was the tele density? The total telephone lines in Nigeria was less than 1 million. Today, how much telephone lines do we have? Imagine if we unleash the potentials of this economy. Even the agricultural sector, where we have colossal waste due to an absence of cold room storage, we probably will reduce those losses. And by the time you block all the leakages and the losses that you are suffering, these are areas where economy, income could come in, and indeed a vibrant middle class will spring up. Last but not the least is the issue Professor Ken also alluded to, the fact that you have graduates and the quality of the education is nowhere near where we expect them to be. Nor is it even comparable to international standards. Certain countries of the world are depending on the, making what we are, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala used to say, we need to be looking at demographic dividend. Nigeria, with a population of 200 million, needs to be looking at how do we extract value from our demography. And the only way we can do that is when we have qualitative education and we can export, human capital when we have sufficient. These are areas where we need to look at, and where if we must have a vibrant middle class that will be sustained over a period of time, we need to do a lot in those areas.
All right, Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much there for your response. Let's bring the question to Professor Nazif Idama. Professor Nazif Idama, conceptually, is it a feasible thing to say, look, grow your middle class, and at the bottom of the pyramid will also be dredged up?
Well, as Alhaji Shuaibu Idris has alluded to, he has made mention of the specific imperatives that we need to put in place in order to create opportunities for wealth, because wealth exists only if you make conscious effort to create it. There is a very limited ability of the private individual on his own, or the private sector, to create wealth without the necessary policy framework, direction, alignment, and harmony that will provide the needed basis for that wealth creation. If you look at typical average Nigeria, we are never lazy people. We are resilient, we are enterprising. What is missing is the fact that the policy alignment is not there. The needed ingredients or intergovernmental relationship to bring into harmony what we require is not there. For example, in the agricultural sector, we know that a significant proportion of our GDP is contributed for by the agricultural sector. We know in the last 30, 40 years, the same problems that have militated agricultural production are still there. How do we solve those problems? Now that we have had some resurgence in the last 4 years of non-oil exports from agriculture, beyond improving non-oil agricultural exports, how do we put a coherent policy framework that promote one, access to credit for agriculture, value chain activities in agriculture, internal processing and value addition of every single agricultural product that is to be exported? Because if in the 60s and 70s we exported raw products and the terms of trade are not too good, nothing stops the terms of trade from deteriorating now. The bug is in most countries that are exporting agricultural products, they export value-added agricultural products. So, but you see, even if the private individual wants to do that, there is a limit to which he can be able to achieve that without necessarily governmental policy. Government policy in terms of sectoral policy direction and priorities, ease of access to credit at affordable interest rate, not market-oriented interest rate, provision of subsistence infrastructure that is directly related to that sectoral activity, particularly for agriculture and industry, and then commensurate governmental activities that will promote intensive use of labor and income generation. I have made mention of the fact in some of our previous discussions that the APC government in 2015, before the election, made a promise that they will build 1 million houses per year. Now, even if that is not feasible based on the economic reality that we have, if government has put in place realistic policy measures to complement private sector initiatives, even if you are building 100,000 houses per year per each state, because we have so much housing gap, then certainly you can be able to build like 3.6 million houses per year, 100,000. Now, if we are able to achieve that, it means that you can create like 70-something million jobs, because averagely for each house that you are building, averagely you employ 15 to 20 people. And housing sector, before, now, and in the future, is one of the most intensive or labor-intensive absorbing sectors, and then a very important catalyst for overall economic development and prosperity. Because if you want to build a house, the National Institute of Quantity Surveyors and all the other engineering bodies will tell you that there are directly over 27 different sectors and items that you will need for building a house. That is directly, not indirectly, which are around 50-something. So if you push so much resources in that, you are likely to have a terrible dent on unemployment. But before we do that, let us ask a question. What is the structure of our technical and vocational education? What is the framework we are likely to put in place to develop excessive manpower in the short term so as to provide the needed commensurate manpower that will be unleashed once we are to undertake massive housing delivery? But we need to sit down and discuss these issues on a holistic basis, but particularly also the fact that we need to organize the informal sector operators to be potential off-takers of the new houses rather than concentrating on the formal sector of the economy.
Yeah, but Professor Nazifi Damat, thank you. Professor Kenny, if I'm coming to you, I know that you want to respond to the issue of the middle class. Do I get the impression from both Shuaibu and Professor Nazifi Damat that there is a distinction between the conditions that would enable the middle class to thrive and then those who populate the middle class? The various things that we talked about, the shortages in power, the fact that we have challenges with other infrastructure and so on and so forth. The providers of those things, the enablers, the policy makers, they belong to the middle class themselves. You know, so are they any distinct and different from the middle class? The middle class, of course, you also have other professionals. You know, you have investors and then employers of labor. Professor Kenife.
They are facing different constraints.
Okay.
Right. Now, the middle class, if you look at the development, there's a very heavy correlation between the growth, the rapid growth of Asian tiger economies of Indonesia, China, India, even Brazil, with the development of the growth in the middle class. There's a very heavy correlation. And so when you have economists saying that the problem of Africa is that the middle class is not there and it's not growing, and that's true. Now, see, the importance of the middle class is that when you're looking at GDP growth rates, the middle class consumes as well as produces, and both quantities are in the growth and in the growth. So, there's nothing that no sector mirrors the middle class as MSMEs. MSMEs is direct mirror of the growth of the middle class. And so you can see those constraints, those binding constraints on the middle class in the context of that. So Shaibu has analyzed the major infrastructure constraint, which is power. And I understand that. That's true. And they also alluded to the other constraints, which is finance. Finance is actually the worst part of it. So you have the infrastructure binding them. You have transportation also, because when you look at the fact that Nigeria produces so much and 30 to 70% of what we produce can't make it into the food chain, is the power and transportation network. Those are the two big things that create that problem. But the third one, which we can help, is the finance. Because if you look at the growth of the MSMEs and finance, in 2008, the amount of money being loaned to that class by the financial sector is only 7%. And now that dropped in 2012 to 0.04%, and not too far. And the thing is, why is the banking and financial sector that we have spent so much money to nurture, they have worked well to bring investment of over $150 billion since 2005 dollars. But we've also paid our price of bailing them out with $5 trillion of public fund. Why do they not want to prioritize the development and investment in this base of pyramid? Because this is where they would make their future money. And not by getting TSA propalava on one hand and then jumping to, all those, and then they go and buy treasury bills and they crowd out private investment, jumping from pillar to post. When CBN has said to them, wait a minute, I have not less than 4 trillion naira of your money sitting with me and earning no interest. Come and take this money and energize this base at 9%, which means 9% is not. Many banks work with 5%, 4% around the world, but that 9% means nothing to them. They want something much, much higher. When they sell your treasury bill, when they buy the treasury bill at 14, 15%, you now come back to borrow at 25 and so much. So, but that is where I see the crux of the problem. If there is a credit flow to the private sector, then they can even fight and survive. They can scale those other binding constraints of power and transportation, because they still manage to survive as long as you are holding down unwarranted import and smuggling of goods and on dumping of substandard goods. They can still survive. But the thing is, I still do not understand why credit cannot flow to the private sector, to the middle class, so that they can produce and then also consume. That's right. That's the thing. They produce the most and they consume the most, and they're about 48% of the GDP. And they create 92% of the employment. And, I don't know. But that's the problem.
That's a question for Shuaibu Idris. That's your Shuaibu Idris. I mean, tell us. I know that that was one of your former sectors. It's always been a major issue, not just in the last 20 years, even well before the advent of democracy. Access to credit has always been a serious challenge. Banks and other financial institutions tend to be more interested in funding short-term trade, buying and selling, rather than the real sector. What has happened in 20 years that they have not been able to eject themselves from that mode?
Kingsley, I will not be defending, the banks or the bankers, notwithstanding the fact that I am a banker and always a banker. I disagree fundamentally with some of the submissions. Number one, Professor Dharma is of the opinion that market is not the best determinant or allocator of resources. Finally and fundamentally, I really disagree with that. The markets are the best allocators of resources, subject to certain rules and regulations of the market. Look at what is happening today in the foreign exchange market. The structure of the Nigerian foreign exchange market leaves much to be desired, and the earlier we change that, the better. Now, to Professor Kenife's position that the banks have monies stocked with the central bank and they should take the money and lend to micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises. It is not so, Professor. Much of what the banks invest in treasury bills, treasury certificates, and other liquidity requirements of the central bank that compel the banks to keep monies in the central bank. It is one of those, exogenous cost factors that the banks have to carry on. You have a banking license, you are compelled to keep a portion of your liquidity with the central bank so that you remain what the central bank determines as liquid. Therefore, yes, a bank may have 1 trillion naira in its liability side of the balance sheet. Can it lend, 900 billion? The answer is no. 2-3 factors are considered in pricing a facility or a loan to any customer of a bank. Number one is what is the financial implication of the monies that you have gotten from your customer. For example, if I get a deposit, just for argument's sake, from Kingsley, and I got the deposit at 15%, are you expecting me to lend to XYZ and Co. SME at 9%? Where do I cover that gap? It's not possible. So therefore, the banks will try to cover the cost of getting the money. Second cost factor that they look at is the cost of doing the business itself, from generators to payment of staff salaries to renting of offices and other technology equipment. It will be added to the cost of the capital that you got either as deposit or you borrowed from other sources. Those are some of the factors that are added in order to arrive at what exactly should be something that will make the banks to not lose money and to also be able to return investment to the shareholders. If we just sit down and think that the banks are Shylock or they are not being fair to Nigerians or Nigerian businesses, how and where are they expected to get the resources? Remember, the banks are performing a bit of a fiduciary relationship. Surplus end of the market keeps money in the banks, and the banks now looks at the deficit end of the market so that they can lend the money without having to lose. But seldom you lend without losing. So those are some of the costs that you add on in order to arrive at the price. But I think Kingsley, we still need to look at the Nigeria and indeed the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and the government of President Buhari needs to look at urgently the issue of expatriate quota. I do not want us to just push that aside. We have too many foreigners in the country that need not to be here, and they are taking the position of Nigerians. Those responsibilities or those positions they are taking rightfully and belongs to Nigeria. Why do you think Trump is stopping people from getting to America? Why do you think the British government will give you a visa and say employment not permitted? We need to protect our national so that they can get jobs. Unless otherwise you create, like Professor Dharma said, unless otherwise you give the opportunity for the young and enterprising Nigerians to grow wealth, you will never be able to grow a middle class. And we are importing poverty. And we have no reason whatsoever to allow, entrepreneurs to import poverty into Nigeria.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, the point that Shoaibu is pressing again with regard to abuse of expatriate quotas, I think it's an item we have to examine.
Exactly.
I'm not quite sure when this started, but I do recall that there was a time that to encourage foreign investors, they said, look, foreign investors could not own 100% of their businesses rather than having a proportion of it also owned by Nigerians. So on the basis of owning a business 100%, they're also using to bring in their own kinds of, even business that they don't own 100%. But it's a very significant point that is raised, and it's something that we have to examine at some point.
All right. Thank you very much, Shaibu Idris. Professors, we'll go in on a break now. When we return, we have some reactions already from our viewers. We'll go through them and also the last lap of the program. Strategy, planning, what next do we need to do to actually gain more performance in the economy? That'll be after the break.
All right, we're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As my colleague Blessing indicated, we have a number of tweets that have come here, but we'll just take some of them very quickly. Amogbala Home, Babs, it has this tweet. It says, just opposing Nigeria's 20 years of democracy with its deliverables, you have a mixed feeling. It's not without some sad tears, but then we can take solace in the fact that the leadership deficit, which hitherto had been our bane, seems to have found its footing.
Let's take this one from Law Alpha C. Insecurity, terrorism are some of the negative realities affecting foreign investment in the country. So government should deploy whatever means to curb it.
And this one, it's coming from Ibrahim Modu Aji. And it's actually speaking to a point that I was going to raise with Professor Nazir Vidama and the other guests. Ibrahim Modu Aji has this tweet. Going forward, let the National Assembly pass a bill tagged national priorities, where every incoming government must work in line with the vision of the national priorities, which will contain national strategic plans of economic development of 1 or 2 decades. The question, that's the last one we're going to take. I was going to ask you this, because when you're talking about development plans, how does the management of the political economy affect the design and implementation of a national development plan, so that if Party A loses election after 4 years and then Party B comes on stream, Party B will not say, look, that plan doesn't belong to us. In the past, we had a consistency, excuse me, under the military, that's during General Yakubu Gowon's tenure. But how do you manage, considering the nature of our adversarial politics, do you manage a national development plan conceived by a political party other than one that is in power?
Excellent. When I was at the National Planning Commission, I was privileged to be part of the 5,800 Nigerians that crafted the Vision 2020 Economic Transformation Blueprint. My minister then made sure that we did an innovation, and the innovation is to conceive what is called Project Development and Continuity Bill, as a way of institutionalizing the Vision 2020 Economic Transformation Blueprint, because though it was conceived under Jonathan, started by Yar'Adua and completed under Jonathan, the country is beyond any individual, and that institutions remain, but president, governors, ministers come and go. That bill was sent to the National Assembly in 2009, and I remain for National Assembly to contradict me. It goes through the first reading, and I think the second reading, and up till today, nobody has done it. And you can be able to trace the genesis of the fight in the National Assembly between the executive and legislature over the contentious constituency projects. If we have a national development planning culture, it involves consultative process across vertical and horizontal level to incorporate sectoral development needs and interventions across priorities so that the issue of constituency projects, the timeline of 6 sub-months dissipated over budget would have been destroyed. And luckily enough, recently, the Adamawa State Governor has asked me to come and restructure the Adamawa State Planning Commission. And when I bring that law to him, he says that he's going to send it to the State House of Assembly quickly so that as we develop the Adamawa State sector strategic plans and the medium-term plan of 5 years, it's not for the Adamawa State Governor or Commissioner, it's for the people of Adamawa State because it will follow a consultative process to incorporate the needs and wants of the people. So I think that is part of the institutionalization process. And I think Mr. President has the capacity, has a debt with history, to return back this country to the culture of national development planning by undertaking 3 important things. Number 1 is the issue of rebirthing the Ministry of National Budget and National Planning. Even the name sounds confusing because planning comes before the budget. So it should be reverted to the National Planning Commission because the subsisting act that provides for the commission insulate it from the usual civil service fluctuations. That is one. Number 2, it is very important, and I say this with element of humility and responsibility. An economist should be appointed to head National Planning Commission. I am an economist. I cannot be appointed a Minister of Justice. It is abnormality for a country like ours to have anybody other than an economist heading the National Planning Commission. Number 3.
I hope they're not hearing you on this one so that you're not conversing.
No.
Your point is noted, Nazif.
Look, you see, the reality is that this country, I am always proud anywhere I am as a Nigerian because for anything that you want to do, you have more than enough competent Nigerians that can deliver.
That's right.
But they need to be discovered. Number 3 is the issue of that minister, if he is appointed, and the president to give that directive. Let us constitute a team. In fact, the people that did the Vision 2020 are still there. So I have said it before, what we need to do, let us revise the Vision 2020 and make it Vision 2030. And then incorporate the Sustainable Development Goals and have priorities and even incorporate the ERGP and then have priority projects, programs, policies fully costed at federal level, state level, local government level. Even if this process will take a year, I think reverting the country back to that culture is one of the most important legacies that Mr. President can bequeath on future generations because that will put our country on a path of predictable, sustainable, and prosperous macroeconomic trajectory and growth cutting across every sector of the economy and dealing with every developmental problem in a holistic manner, not the ad hoc manner we are engaging in.
Thank you very much, Professor Jama. Quickly, now let's get to Lagos before we run off from this point, from this end. So, Shuaibu Idris, briefly, yes, national priorities, no doubt, expedient at this time, and also setting the right agenda. Last week here, the President inaugurated the National Economic Council and taking a look at the various issues that have been brought to the front burner. What do you want to see differently in projected?
I think basically, Blessing, I will align my thought to Professor Nazif's position. It is important that we understand where are we coming from, where are we going, where are we now, so that we can determine where we are going. National development plans and agenda, they are important. One comment, let me not miss it, is the fact that it is more of individuals rather than the system that has issues when it comes to continuity, project continuity or policy continuity. The People's Democratic Party, to which President Obasanjo belongs to, is the same party that President Yar'Adua belongs to when he won the election. Yet, as soon as he came in, he jettisoned the needs policy document. The 7-point agenda of President Yar'Adua, led President Yar'Adua, is the same party that brought him to power, that brought President Goodluck Jonathan to power. When he came in, did he continue with the 7-point agenda? No, he didn't. However, for the first time in the history of this country's democratic governance, we have a president called President Muhammadu Buhari who came in despite the fact that he is not and has never been a member of the People's Democratic Party. Much of the policies that he felt were excellent and good enough to be continued, that were started by President Goodluck Jonathan, he did continue with them. For example, the agricultural policy, the Empower, the rail issues, they were all project continuities that we could allude to the fact that President Buhari, basically grabbed them and continued with them. Definitely, Professor Dharma has a point there. There is need for continuity. The country is bigger than all of us, even collectively, not just one individual. So why should there be a bit of topsy-turvy, a bit of policy somersault? Today you have 2-3 years. After 4 years, there is an election, a new person comes in, and policies are completely changing. So investors can't think of where are we coming from, where are we going. So as long as there is no coherent document that someone will look at and say, I can bet my life in the next 5-10 years, this is where Nigeria is likely going to be, then we have issues. Yes, the president did, inaugurate the National Economic Council. They do sit down and discuss, but it does appear that even within members of the same party, you will realize that the governors of APC, for example, to what extent are they aligning their thoughts and programs to that of the federal government, which is also led by the APC party? I mean, yes, there are meetings. Yes, the committee or the National Economic Council is there, but it is more of sitting down to talk the talk without necessarily walking the talk.
All right, Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much there for your contributions. And just for us to round off our conversation this morning, very briefly, Professor Kenife, your closing thoughts at this stage.
Oh, all right. Okay, I was going to respond to, okay. Planning is everything, without a doubt. But I have listened to both sides, both the National Assembly and the executive on these matters. There are serious contentions on ownership. So for you to have strategic planning, you have to have strategic needs identification, and you have to input that into the planning frame. And we've had that last year when I was on your various programs, decrying what was going on, the tension between the executive and the executive feels that they are the ones that will determine what goes and gets uploaded into the budget frame, so that you can have the continuity and the bill that was proposed can see the light of day. The National Assembly says, no, we have the ownership, so you have to engage with us. And if you don't do that in the budgeting process, we'll throw away all your projects and then replace them with our constituency projects. So that tension is fundamental. I did work for Enugu State in 2000, which is visit every community and then make sure that they have a community, a budget that is influenced by community needs. So it involved identifying the needs and prioritizing 4 of the key needs of every community and then inputting that into the budgeting process. They don't have this kind of problem. But we need to resolve that at the federal level.
All right. Professor Kenife, macroeconomics, policy analyst, thank you very much for coming on the program, and thank you for your insight. Also like to appreciate Professor Nazif Dabma, former Director, National Planning Commission. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Appreciation also to you, Mr. Shuaibu Idris. You joined us from our Lagos studio. Thank you very much for your insight as well. Just some little time to take a look at what's happening on the sporting scene.
Hello, we'll have a wonderful day ahead.